I have enough information from my initial searches to write an accurate, well-grounded script. Let me now compose the full script using the verified data collected. Wood ash. Free byproduct to $0 cost, contains potassium to 6%, calcium 20%, phosphorus, magnesium. Raises soil pH, 20 pounds per 1,000 SQFT recommended rate. Miracle-Gro and synthetic fertilizer bag prices have risen significantly from $8 to $12 plus per bag. Long-term chemical fertilizer used documented to damage soil microbiome, reduce organic matter, acidify soil. Common gardener mistakes: over-fertilizing, wrong pH, not amending soil biology, ignoring soil tests. Look at that plant on the left side of the screen. Now look at the one on the right. Same seed packet, same row, same rain, same Lancaster County clay that my grandfather broke with a mule plow in 1931. One of those tomato plants is carrying 14 pounds of fruit by late August. The other one is carrying 4. The difference between them is not a bottle from the garden store. It is not a bag of blue granules or a gallon of liquid concentrate. It is not a subscription service, a drip system, or a raised bed kit. It is a powder that most of you already have in your backyard, or could have by tonight for $2 at any dollar store if you do not. A powder that my family has used on this soil for 4 generations. A powder that the garden industry would very much prefer you never think about, because the moment you understand what it does, you stop needing about 60% of what they sell. My name is Abraham Yoder. My family has been farming the same ground in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, since my great-great-grandfather settled here. I am not a YouTuber who took a gardening course. I am not a certified nutritionist for plants. I am a man who has watched this specific soil respond to this specific powder across 4 decades of personal experience. And I am going to tell you exactly what it is, exactly how we use it, and exactly why it works in a way that no bag of Miracle-Gro ever will, because Miracle-Gro feeds the plant for 6 weeks and then leaves your soil poorer than it found it. This powder does the opposite. Every year you use it, your soil gets stronger. The plant needs less help, the fruit gets heavier, the harvest gets better, not worse. Now, I want you to sit with this, because what I am about to show you is a complete system. 5 steps, in the order you would do them in your own garden, starting this weekend. It will take you about 40 minutes to understand, and maybe 2 hours spread across the season to apply. By next August, if you follow this and nothing else I say, your tomatoes, your peppers, your beans, your squash will look like the plant on the left side of that screen. Not because I am promising magic, because this is what healthy soil does when you stop fighting it and start feeding it. And one more thing before we get into it. Esther and I put together a short guide we call the Amish Home Savings System. It covers not just the garden, but the whole way we think about self-sufficiency and spending less while getting more from what you already have. The link is in the description below this video. Now let us get into the work. Here is the principle that most modern gardeners have completely backwards. And once you hear it, you are going to recognize every mistake you have ever made in your garden, because they all come from the same wrong starting point. Most people think the job is to feed the plant. That is what the bag says. Plant food, tomato food, rose food. Feed the plant, and the plant will produce. But that is not how a plant works. A plant does not eat from a bag. A plant eats from the soil. More precisely, a plant eats from the community of living organisms in the soil. Billions of fungi and bacteria and microbes per tablespoon of healthy ground, organisms that break down raw minerals and organic matter into the exact molecular forms that plant roots can absorb. You are not feeding the plant. You are feeding the soil, and the soil feeds the plant. When you pour synthetic fertilizer onto your bed, you are bypassing that entire community. You are handing the plant a needle instead of a meal. The plant responds, yes. It grows fast, it looks green and lush in June, and the people at the garden center feel vindicated. But what is happening underneath is something different. The salt load from those granules is suppressing the very microbial life that would have made your soil rich. The pH is shifting in ways that lock out minerals the plant needs in July and August, when it is setting fruit. The earthworms pull deeper or leave entirely, because the soil chemistry no longer suits them, and every earthworm that leaves takes with it the tunneling and castings that make soil drain right and hold moisture through a dry spell. You are trading next August for this June, and you do it again next year and the year after, and each year you need a little more product because the soil is a little more depleted, a little more dependent on the next dose. That is not a garden. That is a habit. Think of your soil like a neighborhood. A healthy neighborhood has bakers and carpenters and doctors and teachers, all trading skills, all keeping each other fed and housed. When that neighborhood is healthy, everybody does fine without outside help. Now imagine someone comes in and starts handing out fast food on every corner. People stop cooking. The baker closes. The relationships that held the neighborhood together start to fray. You cannot now take away the fast food without a crisis, because people forgot how to cook. That is your soil after 10 years of synthetic fertilizer. It forgot how to feed itself, because you kept feeding it from outside. And every bag of fertilizer you buy is the next delivery of fast food to a neighborhood that used to be self-sufficient. The powder that fixes this is wood ash, not bought, not processed, not enhanced with chelated micronutrients and proprietary blends. Wood ash from a fireplace, a wood stove, a backyard fire pit, or a burn pile after clearing brush. If you do not have any, a local feed store, a neighbor with a wood stove, or a dollar store bag of lye will get you started for less than $2. The science on wood ash is not folk wisdom. It is documented by university extension programs across New England and the Mid-Atlantic. The University of Vermont Extension, Penn State, Cornell, all of them have published the same basic finding. Wood ash contains roughly 6% potassium, up to 20% calcium, and meaningful amounts of phosphorus and magnesium. More importantly, wood ash is alkaline. It raises soil pH the same way agricultural lime does, and in most American suburban gardens where years of synthetic fertilizer and pine needle mulch have pushed the pH below 6, that alkalinity is the single most important correction you can make. Because when soil pH is too low, it does not matter how much fertilizer you add. The nutrients are chemically locked. The plant cannot access them. You are pouring money into a locked box and wondering why the plant is hungry. Now, step 1. Before you touch the ash, before you do anything else, test your soil. I know you have heard this before, and I know most of you skipped it. I am going to tell you why that is the most expensive mistake you make in your garden every single year. A basic soil test from your county extension office costs between $8 and $15. It tells you your pH, your phosphorus level, your potassium level, your organic matter percentage, and what amendments you actually need. Without that test, you are guessing. And guessing in a garden costs you in two directions at once. You either add something that was not needed, which can lock out something that was needed, or you miss the one thing that was actually limiting your harvest. Most gardeners who come to me with disappointing tomatoes are not short on nitrogen. They are short on calcium, which is what causes blossom end rot, and low on potassium, which is what determines whether the fruit actually fills out and sweetens. Both of those are in wood ash. But more importantly, their pH is sitting at 5.8 or 5.9, which means all the calcium and potassium in the world will not help because the root system cannot take it up at that pH. The extension offices in Pennsylvania and across the country exist specifically to help home gardeners with this. You dig a few inches down, pull a tablespoon of soil from 5 or 6 spots in the bed, mix it together, mail it in or drop it off, and in about 2 weeks, you have a report that tells you exactly what your soil is doing. You get that done in late winter or early spring, before you plant, while the ground is still workable. That report is the map. Everything else is the road. That is step 1, and I am going to tell you the error that makes it useless even when people do it. They test once, fix the obvious problem, and never test again. Soil is not static. It changes every season. Every crop you grow pulls different minerals at different rates. Tomatoes are heavy feeders of calcium and potassium. Corn is heavy on nitrogen. Beans fix nitrogen and give it back. If you grow the same thing in the same bed 3 years running without testing, you are flying blind by year 2. Test every 2 to 3 years at minimum, more often if you are intensively growing. Step 2 is the ash itself. Once you know your pH, if it is below 6.5 and you are growing vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, beans, squash, you want to bring it up towards 6.5 to 7. That is the window where nearly every vegetable nutrient becomes most available to roots. Wood ash will do this. The rate is roughly 20 pounds of ash per 1,000 square feet for a meaningful correction. That is about 1 5-gallon bucket. If your pH is only slightly low, half that. If you are already at 6.5, use even less, maybe 5 pounds, just for the potassium and calcium without pushing the pH too high. This is the warning I give every time. Do not over-apply ash. If you push the pH above 7.5, you will lock out iron and manganese, and the plants will yellow in a way that looks like nitrogen deficiency, but is the opposite problem. More is not better. The protocol is exact, not approximate. Test, calculate the gap, apply accordingly, and do not guess. The timing matters too. Apply ash in fall after the last harvest or in early spring, at least 2 to 3 weeks before planting. If you apply right at planting time, the high pH zone near the ash can burn young roots before the amendment has time to distribute through the soil. Work it into the top 2 to 4 inches. Do not just scatter it on the surface. Rain will move it down eventually, but if you are in a hurry to plant, you want it mixed in. My grandfather always worked the ash in with the fork in late October, after the beds were cleared. By April, when we planted, it had 3 months to mellow into the soil structure, and the biology had time to adjust. Now, the error most people make with wood ash is using it on acid-loving plants. Blueberries, azaleas, rhododendrons, strawberries, and some varieties. Those plants need pH between 4.5 and 5.5. You put wood ash on your blueberries and you will watch them go yellow and miserable inside one season. Ash is for the vegetable garden, the flower border, the lawn, in some cases. It is not a universal amendment. Know what you are growing and what pH it needs before you apply. That is the second step. But there is one more thing, and this is the one most folks get wrong, even when they know the rest. Step 3 is compost, and I want to be precise about how it works with the ash because most people treat these as separate amendments that you layer in any order without thought. They are not separate. They work together in a specific relationship. Compost feeds the microbial community. Ash adjusts the pH so the microbial community can function. If your pH is too low, the bacteria that decompose organic matter and make nutrients available go dormant. You can put all the compost you want on soil with a pH of 5.5 and the microbes will work at a fraction of their capacity. Fix the pH first with the ash, then the compost has the environment it needs to break down and feed the plant properly. Good compost does not need to be bought. Kitchen scraps, garden waste, fall leaves, grass clippings, coffee grounds, vegetable peels. Esther has kept a compost pile going behind the barn since before our oldest children were born. It is not complicated. It is layering green material, which is nitrogen-rich, with brown material, which is carbon-rich, in roughly a 2-to-1 ratio by volume, keeping it moist, but not wet, and turning it every few weeks to keep the oxygen in. In 6 months to a year, you have finished compost that looks and smells like dark earth, that crumbles in your hand, that feeds the billions of organisms in the soil, far better than any bag of plant food ever could. Apply 2 to 3 inches of finished compost across the bed in spring, after your ash has been worked in and had time to settle. Work it into the top 3 to 4 inches. Then plant. You will notice the difference in how the soil looks and feels. Healthy soil with good organic matter and balanced pH has a crumbly, open texture. It holds its shape when you squeeze it, but breaks apart easily when you press it. It smells faintly of earth, not of chemicals, not of peat, not of fertilizer. That smell is the microbial community doing its work. That is the smell of a soil that will feed your plants through August when the cheap fertilizer has long since washed out. The price of a bag of Miracle-Gro all-purpose plant food, the 5-pound box, is around $12 to $14 at Home Depot right now. Many gardeners use 2 or 3 of those per season, sometimes more. That is $30 to $45 a season on one product. Add a bag of garden soil at $12, a bag of raised bed mix at $18, a bottle of tomato fertilizer at $9. You are at $80 to $100 before you buy a single seed. And every year you need the same amount or more because the soil has not improved. It has gotten slightly more dependent. A soil test costs $10 and lasts 2 to 3 years. Wood ash costs nothing if you have a fireplace. Compost costs nothing after the first year of building a pile. The system I am describing drops your input cost to almost zero within 2 seasons, and your soil gets better every year. Not worse, better. Step 4 is mulch, and this is where I see modern gardeners give up the single largest gain available to them for free. Bare soil is a problem. Bare soil in summer loses moisture through evaporation, bakes in the sun until the top inch becomes a crust that repels water instead of absorbing it and gets invaded by weed seeds, because bare ground is an ecological vacancy that nature fills immediately. Covering the soil between plants with 3 to 4 inches of straw, shredded leaves, untreated grass clippings, or wood chips does 3 things at once. It holds moisture, which means you water less, and the plant never goes through the stress cycles of wet and dry that crack fruit and cause blossom drop in peppers and tomatoes. It suppresses weeds, which means you spend less time on your knees pulling grass, and it breaks down slowly from the bottom, feeding organic matter back into the top layer of soil so that every year you mulch, the soil underneath gets a little richer. My grandfather mulched with wheat straw from our own harvest. We still do. If you do not grow wheat, a bale of straw at a farm supply store is $3 to $5 and covers a 4x8 bed with plenty left over. Shredded fall leaves cost nothing if you have trees. The error people make with mulch is using it too thin. 1 inch does almost nothing in the heat of a Pennsylvania July. You need 3 inches minimum to meaningfully suppress weeds and hold moisture. 4 is better. Keep the mulch an inch or two back from the base of the plant so the stem does not stay wet and rot. That is the only precaution. Otherwise, lay it on heavy and leave it. Step 5 is rotation, and this is the final and most overlooked piece, the one that ties everything else together, the one that the gardening industry has no product to sell you for, which is perhaps why it appears in no advertising and on no bag in the garden center aisle. Crop rotation is the practice of not growing the same plant family in the same piece of ground 2 years in a row. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, and potatoes are all in the same family, the nightshade family. Plant them in the same bed 2 years running, and you build up the specific soil pathogens that attack that family, the fungal diseases, the nematodes, the bacterial blights. You also deplete the specific mineral profile that family draws most heavily on, and you create the ideal habitat for the exact insects and their eggs that feed on that family. Move the nightshades to a new bed, and what was in that bed last year, let us say your legumes, beans, and peas, leaves behind nitrogen that it fixed from the air. The tomatoes love it. The diseases that were building in the old bed have no host. They decline. The nematodes that were specializing in nightshade roots starve out. You have used the biology of the system against its own problems without buying a bottle of anything. Divide your garden into 4 sections if you can, nightshades in one, legumes in another, brassicas, cabbage, broccoli, kale in a third, root vegetables and alliums in the fourth. Rotate one position clockwise every year. That is the whole system. 4 years before anything returns to the same ground? In 4 years, the pest pressure in the original nightshade bed has dropped substantially. The soil profile is more balanced. The plant comes in with less inherited disease pressure and more available nutrition. Esther keeps the rotation chart on a piece of cardboard tacked to the inside of the barn door. It is 7 beds marked with what went where. It does not need to be complicated. It needs to be consistent. Now let me tell you who profits from you not knowing any of this. Not to rile you, just so you see the shape of the thing. The garden industry in the United States sells approximately $4 billion in lawn and garden products every year. A significant portion of that is fertilizers and soil amendments for home gardeners. The products that sell best and most consistently are the ones that work fast and visibly, but do not last. A bag of synthetic fertilizer gives you green growth in 2 weeks. The customer sees the effect, feels the product works, and comes back next season for another bag. If that same customer built a compost pile, tested their soil once, corrected the pH with wood ash, and mulched their beds, they would need almost nothing from the garden center for years. A bag of seeds, maybe a new tool every decade. That customer is worth almost nothing to a retail garden business. The customer who buys fertilizer every spring, potting mix every year, pest spray in summer when the depleted soil starts growing weak plants that attract insects, that customer is worth $40 to $100 every single season. Forever, as long as the soil stays dependent. I am not telling you a man schemed this in a back room. No one had to. It is worse than a conspiracy because it is a system nobody had to coordinate. It simply pays better to sell a product that leaves the soil hungry than to teach a man to feed his soil for free. The pricing confirms the math. $14 for a box of granules that last 1 season. $0 for wood ash from your own fireplace. $10 for a soil test that tells you what you actually need. The gap between what the industry sells and what the land actually requires is not an accident.